Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives us great pleasure to welcome you to our inaugural I.C.A. conference here at the Open University. And we're delighted to be here today as an official MK50 event of lots of things that are happening in our city this year. Of course, this isn't just a momentous day as it's the first I.C.A. conference. There's also the bigger political picture. The triggering of Article 50 today, the 29th of March, will see the UK finally start its official Brexit journey. And I think we all foresee some interesting times ahead. However, politics aside, and whatever Brexit truly means, one thing's certain, businesses here in Milton Keynes and across the UK still need to flourish, grow and scale up. Innovate, collaborate, accelerate. 3 words that will today form the basis of a packed lineup of world-class speakers who will share with you their roller coaster business journeys, inspiring stories, momentous decisions and toughest challenges. We also bring on knowledgeable panellists who will be offering guidance and specialist advice in their various fields of expertise. And no event would be complete without our supporters. We'd like to thank our fantastic speakers, sponsors and supporters for making this event possible. All have helped in shaping this event and we're grateful for your support and your participation today, and it's really great to have everybody here with us.
As Jean and I do social media management for a living, it would be somewhat remiss of us if we didn't wholeheartedly encourage you to tweet along with us today. However, please ensure your phones are turned to silent mode. We have a live Twitter wall sponsored by Red Thread, which will stream throughout the conference, so please join in and use the hashtag I.C.A.MK in your posts and comments. There's a competition, a bottle of bubbly for your best tweet of the day, but a £10 charity fine for anyone's mobile that goes off. You'll find today's programme and running order in your delegate bags. There is just one change to the programme to let you know about. Sadly, City Fibre is unable to be part of our speaking programme. However, we are delighted to have been able to add British Business Bank to this afternoon's session. And finally, I do have to let you know the venue housekeeping. We are not expecting any fire drills, so upon hearing an alarm, we ask you to calmly exit the building and make your way to Assembly Point 2, which is out of the main doors, then right past the restaurant. The OU is a non-smoking campus and has designated smoking areas. The nearest can be found by also going out of the main doors to the right and past the restaurant. The toilets are located just through the refreshment area. And now back to Jean to get things started.
Thank you, Ben. So let's hear about growth, scale up, determination and success. We really hope you'll enjoy the programme today. Please join in with the questions and the debate and of course do some great networking too. That just leaves me to introduce a lady who really here in Milton Keynes needs no introduction. Anne Lim, CBE, our chair for today, without whom this event wouldn't be possible. Champion extraordinaire of all things in Milton Keynes, business and the community, Anne is an educationalist, business leader and social entrepreneur. She has many public and private sector roles and is best known locally as chair of SEMLEP, the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership, and nationally for her role as chair of the Scout Association, the UK's largest youth engagement and volunteering charity, being the first ever woman to take on this role. Needless to say, we're truly honoured to have Anne Lim here as our chair today. Dr. Anne Lim.
Jean and Ben, thank you very much. You are too kind. I am privileged to be here as the chair for the conference today. And in that role, let me tell you, all I shall be doing is introducing our speakers and keeping them to time and making sure you get the most out of your day. Because, Jean and Ben, it is truly fantastic. Not that you've just chosen this date, which I don't know if you had any inside knowledge on when you originally decided that you would do it on a day when perhaps there were mixed feelings from business and from the community about the momentous decisions that Jean's referred to that are being triggered today. But actually, when it was also raining and miserable outside. So coming in here today, I think you're going to, as you can see from the speakers, be enriched and I hope inspired by some of the amazing stories of scale up and growth. Just briefly to say, the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership is supporting this. Jean is a board member. I just declare that in case the Daily Mail are in the room and they think we LEP chairs are all onto some self-interested journey that is promoting our own businesses. I'm actually doing this as a great favour to Jean, not because I want to promote the LEP in any way. My colleagues are here to inform you about the LEP and to, if we can, help you with your businesses. But I'm doing it because there are people like Jean and Ben who in this community are prepared to share their good practice, to bring people together, to get in the kind of speakers that we've got today so that you can benefit from their experience. There's a lot of hard work that goes into putting on a conference like this. There's a lot of people who say, oh, you're just doing it to make money or for prestige purposes or to promote your business. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things. But the reality is, in this year where we're celebrating MK50, this is a business event on behalf of the community that celebrates the growth and the potential further growth that we need in post-Brexit Britain for this city and for the surrounding areas of Buckinghamshire and the wider South East Midlands. So, Jean, just on a personal note, there are not many people, because I am not a morning person, folks. There are not many people. I would get up, put my bra on and put my lipstick on. Marion Livingstone is another one I've done that for. The other one is Pam Gosel, and you're the third. So I am here on time, and I will spend the whole day with you, and I hope keep proceedings going, as I've said. So, without further ado, we have, first of all, a suite of 3 inputs. So this is because I know as a teacher, your brain is most absorbent at this time. You can take 20 minutes of high-energy input from 3 amazing speakers. They will have we will have a pause after each of their presentations for about 10 minutes so that you can ask individual speakers questions, and there'll be mics that will be handed to you for that purpose. We won't have a panel discussion. That comes in the second session after coffee. So, without further ado, as I say, the first speaker is Ian Mason, who is Head of Development at Virgin Startup. You've got a full biography for him in the programme. A fascinating career. I mean, I know when you get to my age, everybody looks younger, but the youth and energy of some of the speakers today, I think, is truly fantastic. He's done an amazing amount in a very short time, and we'd love to hear you, Ian, share your experiences from Virgin Startup with us. So, Ian Mason.
Okay, good morning everybody, and I think if everybody introduced me like that, I'd be very happy indeed. Very nice, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. I think I did have a bit of a video to show at the beginning to introduce Virgin to everybody, but I don't think Virgin really needs any introduction, does it? I think you all get the picture. Trains, planes, hotels, cruise ships, spaceships, the list is growing by the day. But it was never always quite like that. And if I can just flip to my deck, this is where it all began. This was the first Virgin record shop. In fact, actually, it began slightly before that, because we had Student Magazine was the first thing that Richard ever did when he started out. That was started in a basement in Connaught Square, for those that you know London quite well. Then it moved to Albion Street, then to the crypt at St Mary's Church. And then he was kicked out of the church by the church commissioners because he was running a business in a private house, and that wasn't something that you did. Then the local vicar for the church at the other end of the street offered their crypt as a space to start the business. And from there, the office was directly above 2 coffins, and that was kind of the backdrop to the beginnings of Virgin. So some character there. It takes some guts to kind of work in that kind of environment. Then a move to a warehouse in Paddington Basin, which is not like it is now. It was an absolute dump at the time. And then off to Vernon Yard off Portobello Road, and that's where Mike Oldfield and the Sex Pistols were signed to the record label. Richard and his family at the time lived on a houseboat. Joan used to live in the bedroom, Richard ran the office from the living room, and Holly, their first child, would crawl between the two of them throughout the day as they were working and living there. And all that before we get on to the near misses, the dirty tricks, and the actual disasters that happened along the way. And my point of telling you all of that is because we understand startup. We know startup, we've lived startup. And the same is true not just from Richard, but from a lot of the staff that work, certainly through Virgin Startup, including myself. And because of that, we want to change the prospects of startup for good. Now, what does that mean? Well, since 1968, we've made lots of mistakes, and I'm sure everybody knows Virgin Cola, for example, as one of those. We've achieved lots of hugely game-changing successes. So we know each day is a roller coaster, because we've been riding it for 17,884 days ever since. And we want to share what we've learned along the way. And that's what I'm hoping I can do a little bit of today. We are the not-for-profit company for entrepreneurs in the Virgin Group. We know that one business has been founded every minute over the course of the last 12 months in the UK. Startup is absolutely on trend. But most of those startups will still fail. I'm sure plenty of people in the room have got stories of startup that have not succeeded in the way that they would have hoped. Because startup is much less about the idea that you have and a lot more about the execution and the timing of that as well. The margins between success and failure are even tighter now than probably they've ever been before. And so a little bit of extra support along the way we think could make a real difference. So I want to talk about a few things today, and as I say, I will leave plenty of time at the end for some questions. But I've got a few tips to share in terms of both startup and in terms of both growth as well. So looking at turning that idea into reality. So that's probably one of the, well, there's two really difficult steps, I think. One is actually making that first leap and deciding to go for it and how you do that. And the second is once you've made that leap, how do you take your business, which is doing reasonably well, how do you take it from there to the next level? And we're going to talk about both of those things throughout the course of the next 20 minutes or so. So first of all, the first one up there is find out whether your idea is as good as you think it is. So how do you know that that idea is good? Like, how do you actually know that that idea is good? Because it's easy to make an idea sound exciting, and I could tell you about my latest business right now. I'm sure I wouldn't think it would be absolutely guaranteed for success. But actually, unless you know that it's good, you've done all of the hard work behind that, you're leaving the success of your business down to one thing, and that's luck. So it's not enough that your friends and family think it's cool because they'll tell you anything. So what they say is actually really irrelevant. You need to do things like create a fan page on Facebook, drive traffic to that page. If you get 1,000 likes, that's a fantastic endorsement for what you're doing. Opinions carry weight. There's a trend these days for reviews on products that you'll find across websites that you want to buy from. The same is true of a young business. The more reviews you get, the more feedback you get from your customers, the better. Commitments from buyers, if you're lucky enough to get to that stage, all good things. But the best thing by an absolute mile is to test trade. So all of our startups we encourage to actually go out there and do it for a little while before you start to make the decision to take the plunge permanently. So by doing that, you get real, impartial feedback from people you've never met before. It helps you develop your offering, not just in terms of the product or service that you're actually putting out there, but in terms of how the operations side of the business will work. And that's just as important as well. And you actually get to see if you'll sell anything, which is really, really important. So if that goes well, it gives you the confidence to push ahead. If it doesn't, then that's the point at which you should know to call it a day. Second point up there, do your research. Have you found suppliers that will give you everything in terms of what you need to buy to put your product or service together? Have you used this information to create your unit costs? Once you've done this, have you looked at what might be a suitable price for your product or service? Are you making enough profit to cover your costs off the back of that? All sounds really, really simple, right? But the number of people that come to us and haven't done those things is fairly shocking. And so it's important that we kind of spread that message out there in terms of what you should be doing. If you've done that kind of detailed research, it shows that you really understand the parameters of the business. You've worked really hard to develop that idea. But more than anything, it shows whether or not it's actually worth starting the business. And again, all of these things need to be done before you take the decision to do it properly. Next one, progress over, oh, I've knocked the page on, I do apologise. Progress over perfection. And again, this is something which I think if you're an actual entrepreneur at the core, this is something that you'll understand instinctively. But again, so many people that come to us spend so much time trying to perfect what they're doing, make it absolutely perfect because their brand is at stake, their reputation's on the line. But what they actually miss is that whilst you're doing all of that, you're missing the opportunity to trade and get some feedback on what you're doing. And you will actually probably never get going unless you just take the plunge and go for it once you've decided that what you've got is good. It won't be perfect, we know that. You have to get the balance right between creating something that will sell and taking so long to chase that perfection that you never actually get started. The hardest thing to do in business, I think, as I say that from experience, is to generate sales, full stop. But if you manage to do that, some of the other problems that you encounter in terms of how good the product or service actually is pale away in comparison. There's so much more you can do once there's money coming into the bank. You have some customers. You can go from there. And remember that the people that work with you at the beginning either want to see what you do evolve, or actually there's just a greater audience out there that you can tap into as you start to grow as a business. And I think that message is really important. Fourth one, get the detail right. Again, this is really important. You've researched, you've validated your thinking, you've decided on how you're going to do the launch, but have you thought about what happens after that? And again, not many people actually do. Okay, you probably know how you put your products and service together, but how will you get that to the end user? And have you spoken to other businesses about how they have done similar things? Again, all of this kind of thing is much easier if you've test traded at the beginning, of course. And then the final one on startup for me is making sure numbers are realistic. Now, again, if you're anything like me, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think writing a business plan at the beginning could be a complete waste of time, and you probably never look at the document ever again. Unfortunately, one of the criteria for working with Virgin Startup is that we do like to look at your business plan at some point, so I'm not quite sure how that sort of fits together. But the point behind that is it's the formal document that I have an opposition to. There's no need to kind of go into that level of detail, who are you proving a point to, etc., etc. The actual thinking that goes into that plan is what's really important. So I won't sort of name names and sort of shame people, but we once had an application for someone that wanted to open a pound shop in Norwich. And we were looking through the application, and there's lots of interesting information in there about how they drive traffic to the shop, etc. And then we got to the financial forecast and looked at the revenue projections for the first month. It's a pound shop in Norwich, right? £40,000 revenue in the first month. So we called the person up and we said, have you actually thought about this? Like, yeah, no, definitely, I've got all this plan in place, marketing. But that means you're going to sell 40,000 items in the first month when you're a brand new business. Silence at the end of the phone. That's okay, fine. We know that's not plausible, and it's a good example to kind of talk about an event like this. But the number of people that don't put the right thought into those figures is absolutely shocking. And again, it's not about having something that you absolutely know you're going to realise and it's going to be absolutely, as you say, it is on paper. But if you get an idea for the kind of scale that you're facing, or lack of it, frankly, in the early days, then that's the numbers and the profile of the business that you're making a lot of decisions on. And again, a lot of people will start to think about, well, actually, how do I cope when all of these people come and buy my products, etc. Perhaps buy more stock in than is necessary, all the kind of classic mistakes that they make at the beginning. So when I say, make sure the numbers are realistic, that's not someone saying, okay, well, to get a loan, you have to do X, Y, Z. Actually, frankly, it's just about being realistic with yourself in terms of what you can expect from the business. So 5 tips there for startups, and I can see a lot of people sort of nodding as we talk about some of these things. But of course, once you get past that first stage, and that's difficult enough as it is, you've got some money coming in, you think you're doing quite well, you've got a product or service that you can be proud of, well, actually, that's when the hard work really starts. And what I want to look at next is creating growth potential. That's a phrase that I've coined. I'm not entirely sure why. But I think the idea is that there's a lot of focus certainly in government and business support in general around, okay, how can we help those really high growth companies? And that's great because we want to support those businesses that have the most potential to grow. It makes perfect sense. But there are an awful lot of people, in fact the majority of startups, that fall in between those two stages, where actually they have got a business that could do quite well, but perhaps they lack the skills to take that business to the stage where it is able to grow. And that's something we're particularly keen on focusing on at Virgin Startup in the coming years. And so just last week, I ran a workshop for businesses that were at that stage, that want to get to the next level. Oh, sorry. And these are some of the things that I talked about with them last week. So the first thing that you should do, it sounds like something you should do at a startup stage, find out if your target audience is actually your target audience. But really, once you've been trading for a while, you're probably going to realize that you've been aiming at the wrong person all the way along, and that you probably need to look at a different way of doing this. And the exercise that I went through last week that I found quite interesting was, okay, you tell everybody else in the room what your business is, and do it in a minute or something like that. So we have that pitch, and then we put the person's website up next to it. And we ask the room whether they think the website matches the pitch. 20 people did that last week, and I was doing it to make a point. It did go on for a while. But the point being that nobody's pitch matched what was on their website. Nobody had got that right. And you could say, who the hell are you inviting to your workshops? Well, fair enough. But there is a fairly serious point, which is, actually, your target audience probably shifted massively from where you were at the beginning, or you were just misguided in the early stages, and you've actually learned a lot from going through that startup process. And a lot of people are quite resistant to the challenge of saying, well, okay, you've been doing this for 2 years, but actually have you got that right? And let's rethink and reassess that. And that's what we do at the start of that workshop before anything else. So I think that's really important. Can't underestimate the power of getting that right, because of course what follows from there is the sales channels that you're using and how you set up your distribution network if it's a product-based business and so on. And all the decisions that you would make on a day-to-day basis are, or should be, impacted by who that target audience is. So that's number one. The second is crafting your brand narrative. It wouldn't be a Virgin presentation without talking about brand for a little while. I'm going to come back to that at the end if you'll permit me. The third one is learn how to sell. Again, it sounds ridiculously obvious, and you think of entrepreneurs as being people that are quite well able to sell. Actually, hustling, which is what entrepreneurship's really all about, is not the same as selling. And once you get to a certain stage, there's a lot of skills that you could pick up and you should be learning in terms of actually how to approach people, techniques to use, etc., that are really important. And so once you've got going, I encourage all entrepreneurs to go out and actually learn and almost take lessons, as it were. We offer kind of workshops and so on actually how to do the selling, because before you can start to bring people in, you're still going to have to do it all yourself. The fourth one, choose the right time to take investment and take it in the right form. It's quite a wordy sentence. I was trying to be punchy with that, but there's no way of saying that really otherwise. So I think that person owes me the £10 charity fine for a drink, actually. I think that'd be more like yeah, serious crap, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So this one's quite important because every entrepreneur really is looking for where the next pot of cash is coming from. And it's quite easy to understand why. I personally, and we as an organisation, have seen lots of organisations burn through lots of cash and really get nowhere with that money. I think, personally, that's because you need to make your mistakes first. So, if you look at sort of startup books and so on, they'll use the word bootstrapping. Basically, it means not spending money unless you absolutely have to, which is something we've done for a long time, I think, in this country. But it is really important that you do learn those mistakes without making or without spending a lot of money in the process. And that's why we go back again to what can you do for very little money in the early days to prove that this is something that you want to persist with. So the first thing is not to burn through cash. And you see plenty of people that get investment like a month after they've started, and it all goes to hell because they've wasted the money and don't know what to do with it, in fact. One of the people that came to the who are we inviting to these workshops? One of the people that came to the workshop last week was like, so I got £200,000 and I just couldn't spend it. And I was thinking, well, okay, that's not quite the message that you want to be giving to people, really, is it? But more importantly, once you move on from that stage, there is only so much of your business that you can give away. You are going to have to raise again in the future. So actually picking the right time to raise is really important, because if you think about how much value you're getting from that investment, you get more value the further out that you take that. It makes perfect sense, right? You give away more in the early stages because there's more risk for the investor. So having something there that you can be proud of, that you then take investment on, you get a better return the longer you wait for that, generally speaking. And I think shows like Dragon's Den are always about how much equity should I give away? Well, the obvious answer is actually as little as you possibly can. In fact, nothing is the best amount of equity to give away, I would suggest. Because after that, there's always a trade-off. So choose the timing of your investment wisely, and be really smart about which type of investment you take and who you work with as well. Don't just go for the first person that throws money at you. Who you choose as an investor could make or break what you want to do with it going forward. Really, really important. And then the final one on here is being a startup is an advantage. Use it, which is something that everybody tries not to do. Oh, look at me. I've got all this fancy website, I've got this phone, all these sorts of things. Don't talk about the fact that they're a new business. Actually, that can be quite a mistake because startups are more innovative, they are more responsive, they are more flexible. And all of those things are things that organizations that are larger are not. And that can be a real advantage. So working with a startup for a large organization means that they can access all of those things. And that's something that they value really highly. So I think as a startup, you should be talking about that. Cool. Right. I'm going to move on to the brand because I've just been given the 2-minute warning. Cool. So I want to talk now about what I said I'd come back to, which is the brand and crafting a narrative around that. So very, very quickly, the power of storytelling. This is something we think at Virgin that we're pretty good at. So very quickly, Apple versus Microsoft. Storytelling breeds very powerful brands. If you look at Apple, for example, everyone understands what they do, everyone understands the product or service, they craft a story, they make you want the product. Microsoft, the exact opposite. Sorry. Second thing, consider how those stories are constructed. Sounds really obvious, but beginning, middle, and end. People don't do that. Follow that structure. Build the stories to a conclusion. They're not a string of information. Take the audience on a journey. Doesn't matter what your business is. If you take the audience on a journey, that's what resonates with people. Stories contain tension. I'll let you read the quote yourselves. But create a tension with the audience. Create a point of either something that they can associate with or something that they feel challenged by. That's what gets their attention. That's what keeps their attention. And that's how you're allowed to deliver your message. First thing to do, highlight the insight, or the unmet need, to be fair, on which your business is based. This is the first, or part of the first deck for Virgin Active. And so the message here is, the gym or exercise in general is boring. What are we going to do about it? And that's the premise that Virgin Active was founded on. Then, position your idea in a way that you actually meet the need that the audience is now associating with. This is called anti-gravity yoga, which all sounds like nonsense to me, but that's apparently really popular in the Virgin gyms. And that's a way of changing something that could be a very boring exercise, turning it into something a little bit more interesting. Develop your characters. So we call it characters, it's target audience to everybody else. Show you understand them and that you thought about how your idea will make things better for them. Again, you can read that for yourself. But doing this in the third person, quite an interesting way of catching people's attention. If you're pitching for investment, for example, this kind of thing goes down really well. Don't make plot leaps. I'm terrible for doing this, by the way. Right? So I think everybody has followed my thinking all the way along when I'm talking about things. Actually, they haven't, and actually they're somewhere back over here, and it's because I keep doing this. So if you can show the detail, and you can show your thinking, and how you've understood the premise, then it gives people a greater insight, and it brings them on board with what you're trying to do. Speak from the heart, be honest about your inspiration and your journey. In other words, be a startup and tell people why you're a startup. This picture doesn't look relevant at all, but it's because that lady started a business which was fashionable equestrian headwear. And the premise was that, most people look shit when they're wearing a helmet like that, so can we do something that's a bit more interesting? Cool. Keep your audience in mind. Highlight aspects of the idea that can help, in this case, potential investors, but anyone that you're pitching your product to be fair, with their own agendas. So it's what's relevant from what I'm doing to what you're doing. Be humble. Get their feedback, get their input. Their input is really, really valuable. You should never underestimate that. because you love what you create. So this isn't my child, by the way, but the premise that everybody thinks their babies are the cutest in the world. Well, lots of people might disagree with that, and the same is true with your business. So you have to be humble, you have to take feedback, you have to take advice and be prepared to act on that. And finally, theatrics work well, but only if they make a serious point. Not quite sure if that's a serious, no, it is. So this is the BA sponsored, British Airways sponsored Millennium Wheel, as it was at the time when that was put up, except they couldn't get it up. And so we flew a blimp across the top saying BA can't get it up. And that attracted a huge amount of media attention. It was, apart from the cost of doing it, completely free. But it did make a very serious point in terms of the quality of the airline, etc., etc. And that's the point there. It's not a gimmick, it's actually something that drove home a point that they were trying to make. And after that, talk about, nail your first sentence, and the rest will follow. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ian. Now, we've got time for a question or two. If any of those insights and ideas have stimulated people to want to probe further. If you could stick your hand up and say who you are, the mics will find you. So there's a question here, and then just behind you, we'll take two together, and then just behind you, Julie, sitting in the second row in the balcony area, the second mic. Brilliant. Do you mind standing up and saying who you are?
Ian, absolutely awesome. My name's Mark from I.C.A. Indoor Skydiving. What I'm wanting to ask is, you say you run courses for people who want to sell better. Now, I'm a salesman. I try and be good at what I do.
Sure.
It's part of my job. But I'm interested in one of those courses. If you're not a startup, can you still come to one of those courses and learn to become better at what you do currently for someone else? Or is it only for startups?
No, absolutely. So good to meet you, Mark. Yes, so we run all kinds of masterclasses. It's now Virgin Startup. I know it's a startup in the name, but actually it's for anybody that's running a business, really. I think you'll probably find what we do more interesting if you're in the earlier stages. But certainly for people that come along to our stuff 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in, and they'll find it valuable. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Happy with the answer, Mark? Jolly good, okay. And
we're looking for challenges, are we? Right, okay. Bring it on. Are we talking? No, we're not doing Brexit today, are we? No, that's good.
Hi, Julie Mills, Principal of Milton Keynes College. I was interested in the progress over perfection.
Yes.
You mentioned that kind of entrepreneurs just get that, whereas maybe other people don't. So my question is twofold, really. Firstly, do you think that you can teach or learn to be more enterprising and entrepreneurial if you don't just get that? And secondly, do you need to be an entrepreneur to set up a successful business?
Oh, thank you, Julie. Very good question. So, I'm seeing some smirks around the room, okay. So I think there's a couple of things there. I think you can teach anyone to run a business. And I think once you have got something, it's quite easy to bring somebody in to be able to run a business. I think there are lots of people that have a skill that start a business, but don't know how to run one, and you can teach that too. I guess it depends on what your definition of entrepreneur is. So I suppose for me an entrepreneur is someone that, well, I was just chatting to the chap at the front here that's coming up to speak shortly, start something, probably get bored of it after a little while, move on to something else, and the chain keeps going. So in that genuine sense, I think that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Go back to what your actual question was, to be fair, in terms of progress over perfection. I think the idea behind this is that if you looked to create something and launch it at the perfect time in the perfect way, it's never going to happen. And I think the propensity of entrepreneurs to just go for it a little bit earlier is what leads to them being successful, but the ability to do that doesn't have to be something that is unique to an entrepreneur, if that makes any sense. So it's just that they're more inclined naturally to be able to just say, all right, let's just crack on with it, whereas actually it's just pointing out to people. I guess much like all the property programs that were on TV in the 90s, where people used to burn lots and lots of money doing up houses and putting in really fancy appliances, and then the person presenting it would turn around and say, well, why are you putting that in? Because you're not going to live here. You just need to do something that will get it sold. And it's the same kind of principle there. It's what can you do to get something out and started, and then you develop from there to turn it into what you actually dreamed of in the first place. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Very good. One more, if there is anybody else. So just in the front here, and we'll just take that as the final question
Sure.
for Ian. Yeah.
Hi, Andrew Smart, Virtual Sales Team. I'm just intrigued by your definition of a startup. When does a startup cease to become a startup?
When it gets boring? No. I think that is a really good question, actually. I think once you start introducing policies and systems and processes, that's when it becomes. No, when it gets boring. There we go. Let's do that.
Wonderful answer. Ian, thanks so much for getting us off to such a good start. And I hope, are you going to be around for the rest of the time? I hope if you haven't had a chance to ask a question or to find out anything more from Ian, you can do so over the coffee break. So please put your hands together.